What inspires you? Is it a specific place? A specific feeling? A beautiful drive? For me, inspiration can come at any time. And as a photographer, I find my greatest inspiration while I'm traveling the world. Greece is such an incredible place. It's full of beauty and history, and it's always been a source of inspiration to me. When we travel to these beautiful locations, photography is a way that we can capture not only these experiences, but turn these experiences into beautiful memories. When I was standing there, the first time I looked at the valley, I couldn't believe that something so beautiful existed. I knew that I had to capture it and make it part of my photography portfolio. I love how now I can be on location and I can import these raw photos onto my iPad and start editing and sharing them in real time while I'm shooting. The quality of my photography is something that's very important to me. Who wouldn't want to make their photos the best they could possibly be? And with my photography, I want to capture not only that strong visual element, but the emotion of being there as well. I want people to feel what I feel through my photography as if they're seeing this for the first time themselves. Sometimes you can't control when inspiration happens. Sometimes I don't want to wait till I get home before I edit my photos. It can happen on the fly, it can happen while you're shooting on location, sometimes while I'm out at dinner. We all have the ability to be photographers. And what unifies that for me is we can all do this with a shared love and passion for capturing those locations. It's such an amazing time to be a photographer. And I feel like as things continue to evolve, we'll become more creatively empowered. And I can't wait to see what's next.
Wow. Well, everybody, welcome with me, Elia Locardi on stage. Wow, this was quite an inspiring video.
Yeah,
welcome to Photokina, welcome to the Adobe booth, and I'll take it away right away. I mean, I can't wait to see what you're going to show us today.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Elia.
All right. So, once we switch over to the main slide, first of all, thanks everybody for being here. Thanks Adobe for having me. This is an amazing year at Photokina. Some amazing things have come out. And let's just go ahead and dive right into it. So I am a full-time travel and destination photographer, and basically what that means is that since 2009, I've been on the road full-time. I've visited more than 55 countries, and I've flown well over 1 million miles. And you can see there, the graphic there, my map's getting pretty complicated, but there's still some major pieces missing. So it's a current work in progress. More recently, a few years ago, in 2012, my wife and I decided to do something that was a little bit interesting. So we were having all these great experiences all over the world, but we wanted to take it a step further, and we did something that was really interesting, and we became 100% location independent. So if you guys don't know what location independent is, it's basically a really fancy way of telling your parents that you're going to be homeless. So if you start the conversation, you say, "Hey, Mom, I have this really great idea. I'm going to be homeless." It doesn't sound as good as if you say, "You know what? We've thought this through, and we're going to become location independent." When you say that, they're like, "Good idea." It doesn't sound like homeless. But essentially what it means is that we've been, since March of 2012, fully location independent and on the road full-time without a home base. So it gives me the opportunity to have some great experiences and travel and not be tied down to a destination. So you guys see there, you see the bags there in the upper left corner of the screen? You guys might see a bunch of bags, shoulder bags, and roller bags. What I actually see is a kitchen, a bathroom, a living room, and then my wife travels with me, so some shoes and things like that. Now, we started collecting, since we can't collect things and bring them home, we started collecting our boarding passes, and you can see them laid down there. We actually have a small 5 foot by 5 foot storage unit you can see on the right. Now, when you guys travel to different destinations in the world, you're hiking, you're running, you're doing all these things, it's important to stay hydrated, right? Wrong. Don't stay hydrated. Stay caffeinated. So that, up there in the upper right corner, that is the most important thing that I travel with. That fuels me and actually got me here to Photokina today with the espresso that I need. So again, caffeination's better than hydration. But the tools change, and you can see on the bottom there, my toolkit changes as things evolve. And things have been getting really interesting. And that boarding pass collection has actually turned into quite a massive pile, as you guys can see here. So we're about 4 years collecting boarding passes and bag tags, which has been pretty interesting. But today, what I want to talk to you guys about is sort of the state of mobile photography, post-processing, and raw processing. But when I started as a travel photographer, the most important thing to me was, one, I wanted to experience these new destinations. I wanted to see the world, but I wanted to find the best subjects for travel photography. Now, if you think about places that you want to visit, and a lot of you guys live here in Europe, so it's much easier for you guys to get to these places than it is from North America. But when I wanted to go to Rome, for example, I thought, what's the biggest, most iconic thing I can shoot in Rome? And of course, that's kind of an easy one, right? The Colosseum. So I went and I wanted to photograph and get all the colors and the beauty of the Colosseum. And then in Rome, I took it a step further and I started shooting from bridges and just finding the most beautiful areas at the most beautiful times. Now, if we think about European cities, iconic European cities, other ones might come to mind like Paris. Now, can you guys think of an object that represents Paris? Yeah, that's pretty easy. Eiffel Tower. So with this, I started a little bit farther away. I started at the tower. It's Montparnasse, which I'm sure I'm butchering in the French language. But it gives you a big overlook of the city. And then from there, I just kind of wanted to do some different things, like juxtaposition the old and the new, the gargoyles of Notre Dame against the new buildings and old buildings of Paris. So with European cities, it was pretty fun in the beginning because there were these strong icons. But when I started getting into landscape photography in places like Iceland, it was a little bit more difficult. Well, Iceland doesn't have an Eiffel Tower or a Colosseum, but it does have beautiful waterfalls. And it does have, of course, ice in Iceland. If ice wasn't in Iceland, there'd be a big problem. They'd have to rename it. And this is what I've been doing all over the world. So take Japan, for example. In Japan, I just thought the bamboo forest would make an excellent subject for photography. Or probably the most special photo from Japan to me is this one of the Teredo Pagoda, Mount Fuji, in a town called Fujiyoshida. And for me, this perfectly represented Japan because I have a beautiful pagoda, cherry blossoms, and Mount Fuji all in the same frame. And that was pretty cool. But you can notice here that this is a very colorful photo. There's a lot going on as far as lighting. And that brings me to the main topic of this presentation, which is actually post-processing. Now, if you guys are like me, you think of post-processing in RAW, you're thinking about taking all your RAW files back to your computer and maybe using Wacom tablet with your desktop and all this sort of high-end hardware. Whatever you have, basically, you're always saying, I wish I had something faster. I wish I had a way to access this quicker. I wish I could get to my to my photos more quickly and process them right away. Well, everything that I do is based on this very simple workflow. So all of the photos that you'll see me present, it starts with raw file adjustment, any exposure blending that I need. There's some color correction and adjustments, sharpening details, and noise reduction. But historically, for me, this has been very difficult on the road because I'll shoot a ton of stuff. I have to import it all onto hard drives and then bring it into my computer before I can get to it. So it might be a matter of hours or even days or sometimes weeks before I can work on my photos. But this, very recently, and it's very exciting, Adobe announced full RAW editing into Lightroom Mobile. So any RAW photo that you can use on your Lightroom desktop now works on an iPad Pro or even your iPhone. So you can directly import your files and edit them in real time in the field. So you guys saw a little bit of that video in Greece in the beginning. We were actually experimenting with this iPad to see what we could get out of the new mobile tools. And it's really cool. So while you're in the field, instead of having to just take your cards back home or back to your hotel, you can now plug them right into your iPad or your iPhone and start editing them in real time. And this gives you the ability, once you plug that card in, to just import everything into the Lightroom catalog and have full control over it. So you can see here's actually the mobile Lightroom catalog. And inside of Lightroom Mobile, if you're familiar with Adobe Lightroom, you have all of the basic adjustments. You can also do linear selections, things like radial selections, all on your iPad and your iPhone on the raw file itself. And immediately in the field, without ever leaving the location, you can take your raw file from something like this straight out of camera and then give it all of that contrast and all the things that you want it to have in post-processing without ever leaving the field. So in a case like this, that's before coffee and before breakfast, I already have the raw file edited. What's great about that is it doesn't stop there. When I edit everything on my iPad or my iPhone in Lightroom Mobile, anything that I do can be tethered and synced with Lightroom Desktop. So once on the desktop side you enable syncing with mobile, everything that you do on that mobile photo, on that raw photo, will pop into your Lightroom desktop at home. And vice versa. If I change something on the desktop, it'll update again on the mobile side. So I can go back to my hotel, work on the photo a little bit, take my iPad with me, go to a lunch meeting with a client and say, hey, look what I shot this morning. And then, oh, before I'm in the meeting, I can make some small tweaks to the raw file since it's all intact. So it's an end-to-end, 100% raw workflow. So it was a very exciting thing to be a part of this year and to see Adobe release something interesting. Now, I know a lot of you guys are like, I see a lot of nods, like when I say raw, everybody's like, yeah, raw. And then some people are like, I'm not really sure. I'd rather shoot JPEG or something else. Well, just really quickly, why shoot raw? Well, let's take a look at some before and afters. And you guys have had this situation, especially a few years ago with older cameras. Newer cameras, we have incredible dynamic range. But when you shoot a scene, it's not exactly how you intend it to be. So this is straight out of camera. Here's the blended shot. So you can see we've overcome some limitations of RAW. And in this case, this is an older file, so I had to blend different exposures together. But in cameras these days, like take a look at this photo here of Iceland. It's a very beautiful waterfall. And this is straight out of camera. From straight out of camera, some basic RAW adjustments, and I can take it from here to here. So you guys see the difference there. It's really nice. So basic adjustments. And all over the world, and here's actually something I shot while I was in Greece. This is shot from a drone, actually, straight out of camera, raw file, with some adjustments to the raw. So you can see in this case, if we go back a step, you notice how the sky is really blown out? In Lightroom, all I had to do was create a linear selection and pull the highlights down a little bit, and then bring the color back up so the sky came right back in. So it's a really amazing thing that you can do with raw photos that you can't do with JPEG, because RAW contains all of that information. Prior to this release of Adobe Lightroom Mobile a couple months ago, we didn't have access to raw photos on mobile devices. So this is really exciting to be able to make these huge changes without having to use a very powerful computer anymore. So here's Hallstatt in Austria. I know most of you guys have seen this, but you can see the before and after. Simply straight out of camera. And again, you can kind of see my procedure. I'm looking for contrast, color, different things like that. And from here, it can get a little bit more complicated. The nice thing about raw control is we have specific control over the shadows and the highlights. So this is already a really cool scene here in New Zealand. But take a look. Pay attention to the pillars when I go from the before to the after. Did you guys notice all the greens that popped out there? All that information was sitting in the single raw file. All I had to do was pull the shadow slider up a little bit, add a little bit of contrast and color, and all that beautiful mold and all that decay on those columns just popped right back in. So it's very exciting. The other thing is when you're shooting these beautiful locations, something like this, shooting in Tuscany, waking up early, trying to get the beautiful fog, those things that we really want to capture. Sometimes when we shoot through the environmental haze, it's a little, flat. It can be flat. So in Lightroom, we can just add some tweaks, and we can bring all that contrast and that power back to that image. So again, this is just a raw adjustment with some tweaks. Oh, it's really fun. It's very empowering for photographers. And again, same thing. You guys see the sky there blown out? The shot's pretty cool, but with some simple raw adjustment, we can just take it from a straight out of camera, basic, pretty good photo to something that's really nice, something that we probably want closer to our portfolio. Now, this is from the project that you guys saw in the video. This is a before and after from Greece. This was straight out of the camera. Do you guys notice it's perfect, right? Straight out of the camera, no problems at all. I think my shadows might need a little bit of work. Well, we could just tweak the shadows. That's from a single raw file. And I recovered 2 stops in the shadows on Lightroom Mobile and did some additional editing in Photoshop after just to sharpen and clean. So here's another example from Greece. Here's the before image. Here's after, the raw processing. Do you guys notice all of that coming back into that image? All of what I was able to recover in the shadows? It's pretty amazing. There's something else you might notice here. Down in the lower left corner, watch that again, there is a parking lot. I did remove the parking lot. So I will take blame or credit for that. And that was done in Photoshop later. So what I actually did is I shot in the field, edited with the iPad, and then when I got back to my hotel room, it synced with my laptop and made some tweaks and brought it into Photoshop, painted out the structure, and I was good. Now, my workflow doesn't just go through RAW. Sometimes I blend different moments in time together to create surreal elements or stuff that you may not be able to experience in a single moment. So let's say a few minutes combined. Something like this, that shot in Iceland that we saw. Well, this was straight out of camera, but with a little bit of blending, I was able to first adjust the sky in RAW and then blend in a 15-second exposure for the water. Or something like this, in New Zealand, I'm shooting telephoto, 105 millimeters, looking right at Mount Cook down the road, and I wanted to make this unique, so I added light trails from the cars. So this is blending different moments in time together. I actually had my friends drive up and down the road over and over and over again so I could get the exposures right in camera to be able to get that. Now, it doesn't stop there. So this is a really interesting example of what I call blending time. So this is Osaka Castle. This is at sunset. And I really like the sky, so I wanted to lock the sky in. I waited about 20 minutes longer, and the lights came on. And once the lights came on, I was able to keep the sky, and then the lights from the cherry blossoms, and then I was able to enhance it again using Photoshop and Lightroom together. So this concept is something that I've been doing all over the world. Now, take Greece, for example. Beautiful sunset, edited then in Lightroom or Lightroom Mobile, brought into Photoshop with additional exposures to create something truly unique, to bring those lights in. So what we're seeing now is about 25 minutes of time blended together. And it works. Really good examples here. Beautiful sunset. And now what I've done is I've brought in the lights from the blue hour. So I've been able to combine time together to create something truly unique. And it's really fun. So if you guys have been to Rome, I love Rome. I'm there all the time. This is one of my favorite places to shoot sunset. And at sunset in Rome, they have great sunsets. But a little bit later, the lights come on. And if I can find a way to combine those things together, then I get the best of the artificial lighting and the natural lighting from the sky. So this is sort of where I challenge myself in photography. After that raw processing, multiple raw processing, and then blending different moments in time together. And it's fun. I can do this in landscapes, different cityscapes. Like Hong Kong, for example. Has anybody been to this spot, Victoria Peak in the morning? It's the most amazing cityscape I've ever seen. Now, this is after the sun has come up, but 20 minutes before that, and the city was glowing as well. So what I've actually done is combine the artificial light from the city with the natural light from the sky to create a blend of about 25 minutes together, to create this super moment that's more of how I remember it. But you know, I also remember being really sweaty because it was the tropics and tired because I woke up early. But that stuff doesn't really make the photo. It's that final impression of the visual element. Now, this technique of using raw processing and blending also gives us the ability to not only blend time together, but blend elements together. So some of you guys are familiar with star trails and how to do star trails. It's pretty easy. But when you shoot star trails, you have to do some blending in Photoshop naturally. So what I've done is I've blended 150 star layers together using a blending mode called Lighten. And what I did is I blended that right over top of my background shot. So the first thing I did was set up the scene, get everything right in camera. I knew exactly where I wanted the church to be positioned. And then I shot the stars and blended. This may all seem complicated, but it's really not. So if you guys are curious about the technical breakdown, it's impossible for me to teach it in 20 minutes. But if you go to my website, elialocardi.com, you'll actually find video tutorials where I walk step by step through this process from raw processing all the way through Photoshop, and then it starts getting into blending different moments in time. So if you guys want to learn from me, you want to learn how I created these photos, all you have to do is pick up Creative Cloud, check out some of these tutorials, and you'll be well on the way. So with that, thank you guys.
Well, thank you, Elia. That was awe-inspiring, really.